Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. Welcome to another episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're joined by Mihir Shah. Mihir is the principal of Kreate Dental in Kent, which he reinvented when he took the practice over in 2018, which is no mean feat in itself, because buying a practice is a big job, but to then reinvent it is quite remarkable. Mihir qualified in Leeds back in 2013 and has spent his clinical career in and around the Kent area. You'll hear through this podcast, his infectious enthusiasm is just remarkable. And his drive is going to take him on to great things. So welcome here. How are you?
Hi, Andy. Hi, Chris. I'm really well. So I want to just firstly thank you both for allowing me to be on your podcast this afternoon. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
No, not at all. We're
nice to see you.
Delighted
really
to
nice
have you here. Yeah.
I always find it amazing when you look at something like you qualified in 2013. And I'm thinking, God, I really remember 2013. Look at you. That was when you qualified. We'd been in business for, it's amazing. It's amazing that you're so young to have done what you've done and created what you've done. Oh, sorry, get that all there for your practice. But I think it's fascinating. It's been a fascinating story, a fascinating listen, I think it's going to be.
Yeah, well, for myself, I never really had a clear path of what I was going to do. And I was kind of just driven by interest and opportunity. So give us your backstory. Were you always destined to be a dentist from a young age? How did that whole thing start when you were a kid?
So not really, Andy. I mean, I came from kind of, very normal kind of background, or a dental background. There's no one really in my family that actually does dentistry. So it kind of stems from how my interest kind of went into the profession, really. So I was fortunate enough when I was 15, 16 years old to have a family friend who was a dentist. And effectively what happened was that I ended up observing him and shadowing him for a period of 6 months. Lovely, lovely guy. And he really kind of gained my interest in the profession. I like the hands-on aspect of obviously dentistry, but as we'll probably go on to talk, the fact that you can also run a business on the side. I explored other avenues as well, to be totally frank with you, based on my personal set of circumstances, where I also fluttered with the idea of medicine, but I felt that it wasn't really the right path for me. It didn't offer the flexibility necessary that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do always something where, more clinical and more surgical, whilst maintaining, a certain level of autonomy on the business side of things.
Wow. And on that, when you did that shadowing in the 6 months of it, was that sort of like, were you paid, or did you just sort of like say, well, actually, I'm just going to come and watch and learn and sort of like soak it all in?
I wasn't paid. I think, he literally just took me under his wing.
Wow.
It was, 6 months. Sometimes on Sundays as well. He was running Sunday clinics, and sometimes would just ask me to give me a hand on reception, do some admin stuff, and I kind of just did that for that period of time. But I never really looked at it as an opportunity.
But to be honest, I think that makes you exceptional in your own right.
Yeah, so that's
so
amazing.
Many people, their start point is, and how much am I going to be paid? What's my hourly rate? But isn't it we've ended up in a situation where that kind of give first and receive later. That's becoming quite an outdated concept.
Or at 16, I'm going to go down the park.
Well, yeah.
I'm why would I want to go and watch and listen and observe dentistry? Oh man, I want to go down the park with my friends or something like that. I mean, I think that at that early age to sort of want to go, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have a look at something. I think it's pretty amazing, actually, mate.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
So on that point then, we get quite a lot of younger people listening to this podcast, possibly even kind of aspiring dentists. What would be your tips for them, for young people thinking about dentistry as a career? Because, you're still a young guy. You probably still remember what that felt like as a teenager and then having to get your grades to get to dental school. But for young people thinking of it as being a career opportunity for their future, what tips would you give them?
So I'll be totally frank with you, Andy. My story is the typical underdog story. That's the best way I can explain it. Every hardship that one person could experience, I've experienced, whether it was my personal set of circumstances, my health when I was younger, which I'm sure we'll go into. And the tips I could always say is never give up, really. If you've got a dream or an ambition, don't let anything or anyone really tell you anything else otherwise. Stay focused, be as hardworking as you can, and ultimately your vision can sometimes become, your vision can be a reality. That would be the best way I could say it. And it's always good to talk to people around you. So what I found is, I was reading a book a couple of months ago. It's always good to have a good mixture of friends.
Yeah.
And my friends and my colleagues, I've got people who are the same age as me. I've got people who are younger than me. These Generation X who can just do everything so quickly on an iPhone, who can run their life on an iPhone. And I have also people who are older than me, who I respect, and adore. And it's learning those mixed opinions and those values that have helped shape and guide my life a lot.
And is that something that you feel is present in younger people? Is that something that is a maturity thing, or have you always adopted this attitude of, I can learn from people around me, beneath me in age and above me in age? Is that something you've always had as a philosophy, or has it come as you've got a bit older?
I think it's come as I become older and a little bit more experienced.
Yeah.
With time, to be totally frank with you, where you learn. I found that I've always learned different things from different people, and come what they may be, it's irrespective of their age. And
that tenacity, you were saying, the underdog, and you had health issues as a kid. Has that been your driving force? Is that really created that core within you that says, well, if I can get through that, surely I can get through anything? Because, like I say, what you've achieved so far for someone relatively young, I'm sure there's lots of either FDs or young associates who look at you and think, that's quite impressive for a young guy. How do I get there? What's that tough beginning for you? Something that really set that cast for what your future was going to look like?
I think so. I think because I went through a lot when I was younger, to be totally frank with you, and I saw things that probably not normal, 16-year-old or a 15-year-old teenager would have. It's not your conventional upbringing. And, once I felt that if I can get over this in my life, everything else, yes, it's difficult, but ultimately it's just a stepping stone to get over. And that's been my mindset. Nothing is the end of the world.
Are you able to share what they were, Mihir, or is it not something that you want to?
Absolutely fine. And that's the reason for today, really, that ultimately, if my story can provide some value and inspiration to anyone, I would love to be able to provide that. So I was born with a life-threatening congenital heart condition. And when I was born, my parents were told that I would have 48 hours to live.
Oh, wow.
So
you've done pretty well.
So when I was younger, I was in and out of hospital a lot. I was under the care of Great Ormond Street Hospital for a period from the ages of 2 to I was 18. And over that period of time, I had 2 major open heart surgeries, one when I was 2, and then one just before my A-levels, ironically.
Oh, nice.
So you were under Great Ormond Street between 2 and 18. You had major heart surgery, yet between 15 and 16, you also gave up 6 months of your time to go and volunteer at a dental practice.
Yeah.
I mean, we just skirt over that, but well, yeah, I can see there's a real thread building inside you about wanting to get things done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that comes also from my dad. He's always said follow your dreams, and just he's always encouraged me to go for whatever I wanted to do. So without their encouragement and support, I would never be here today where I am. I'm blessed to obviously have a second opportunity in life, particularly after the 18 months that everyone's experienced. And ultimately, it's an opportunity to hopefully inspire others. That's what I want to do.
When you must grow, and it's hard, isn't it? But when you grow up with I'm trying to think how to put this. When you grow up with that congenital heart issue that then I'm assuming, was ongoing, might still be ongoing. So your potential outlook could be limited, or you could turn into a limited outlook person. You've obviously chosen the non-limited outlook, and it's fascinating. I'm just trying to sort of encapsulate what it is, because that must be something that you make a conscious decision that says, I'm not going to dwell on the what ifs. I'm going to deal with the going forwards and the stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's the way I see life, to be totally frank with you, Chris, in the sense that I always felt these are the cards you've been dealt with. They're not the cards that, I would have wanted. No one would have wanted that. And ultimately, that is the situation that you're in. And you could either, as you mentioned, let it, dictate your life. And this comes down to, I think, a mindset thing. And I've always tried to maintain a positive mindset and a growth mindset as much as I could do. Yes, you have your ups and your downs, and like anyone in this world, you have your fears and your challenges. But I've always tried to maintain, a positive outlook, as much as I can, and that's what's helped me, face the battles that I've had ultimately.
And I think that you're right, and that thing you say, it's not always like it. And I think there's kind of this misnomer that some people just seem to have this boundless confidence and positivity all the time. That's not the reality. I'm pretty positive. I'm pretty positive most of the time. But that doesn't mean you're not going to have days when you think, God, it's bloody hard, or it's a bit rubbish or whatever. Because that's being a human, that's the reality. It's not going to be every day. It's going to be like that. Some days you're not going to want to go to the gym or eat well or whatever it might be. But that's just the ebb and flow of life, isn't it? Yeah. But I guess when you have the start that you had, and you're grateful for the days that turn into weeks, that turn into months, that turn into years, that repeating behaviour and consistency is where that kind of infectious mindset of positivity just keeps getting fostered. And that also brings people around you who want a bit of that as well. So it doesn't surprise me that the people you interact with and your team and your practice and your friends, probably that rubs off on them, because it does become infectious.
Yeah. Well, I try and provide as much inspiration as I can to team members, and try and provide as much support as I can, so that, everyone can reach their potential, in whatever shape or form that they want to.
Yeah. It must make a real difference to how you approach, like, for instance, your dental business, because if you can deal with what you've had to deal with from a health point of view, everything else must sort of like fall into, this is my health issue, which is a difference between being here and not being here. So everything else sort of falls into, it's nowhere near as dangerous as it could be. Is that right, Mihir? Does that sort of...
You kind of hit the nail on the head there, Chris, in the sense that it's true that, when you've gone through that, ultimately, yes, life is going to throw you loads of speed bumps and loads of difficulties, and it certainly has done over the last 18 months. But ultimately, it pales. I wouldn't say it's insignificant, but it's, when you've gone through that, it's not as, nothing feels as difficult. It's a problem. Let's find a solution. Let's work to it. And I love finding solutions to problems, ultimately. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis as dentists. Find solutions to the problems that our patients come and.
That's quite a nice way to think of it, because you're right. You fix problems, albeit in a mouth on teeth. But actually, that skill of fixing problems has a great application in the world of business, because things crop up all the time. And I think about your own practice. You bought your practice in 2018. Virtually immediately embarked on a remodeling program of that practice. So by the time that was in, the work was done, you got settled, it wasn't long before this thing called COVID turned up. So in terms of resilience and what was required, I guess some of those things that had happened in your earlier life, you were probably slightly better placed than lots of people, because in the early days of owning a business, it's a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights anyway, isn't it? You're not entirely sure what you're doing. You're being asked to make a million decisions. You don't really know how to make them. You don't really know what the right answer is, but you just have to keep making them. So how did that feel like when you took over? And why would you buy a business and immediately embark on this radical makeshift of the practice? Was that part of the plan, or did you just feel you couldn't wait?
I think it was strategic to a certain extent, based on, you know, when I bought the business, you could see things. There was only one way it could go. Yeah. Really, to be totally frank with you. So it was similar to, you could say, in my life, really. It's either boom or bust. Really. either you go with it, or you know, you just sit on your ass and don't do anything really. But effectively, what kind of inspired me was that I saw that the practice had great potential. It had substantial levels of underinvestment for a long period of time, and the patient base of that clinic didn't know anything else. They didn't know any better. They only knew one type of dentistry, which was how it was for the best part of 25, 30 years. So I knew that through, you know, slow and steady, you know, building, eventually we could get it to a stage where we can then I could really remodel it and put my own stamp on it. I would say that process probably took 3 to 6 months initially before we, you know, could really say we ironed out all the major problems. But there were still issues there, you know, and what I found is that as the practice grows and develops, you're always going to have issues. You're always going to have problems. But what's changing is that the class or the caliber of problem changes with time. So
yeah.
And that's what I love about learning, is that, you know, the problem solving becomes more complex, but it ultimately becomes more enjoyable as well. So
yeah, did you make decisions quick enough?
Good question. Did I make decisions quick enough? I would say yes, I did. I would say yeah.
Yeah, I think that's always a strong sign of somebody who's truly entrepreneurial, someone that has the ability to make. Barack Obama did a talk in Mexico years ago, and somebody said to him, you know, being president of the United States, it's ridiculous the number of decisions you've got to make, and how do you cope with the scale of the decisions you're making? And he said 51%. He said, if you've got information that leads you towards an answer, and the information you've got gets you to 51%, make a decision. Because if you then make a decision, that puts you on a path. You can always change your mind and make another decision, but at least you've made a decision. And that thing about speed of decision, I think if you make it, you're making progress. It might not be perfect. It might not be exactly where you need to end up, but at least you're making the decision. So it's great to hear that, you know, on reflection, you know, you were making those decisions quickly, because I don't know, but I imagine when COVID hit and, you know, you'd have had to shut your practice in March to June as a minimum, you would have had to again go into a new environment where you had to make another whole heap of decisions quickly.
Yeah, and that's literally how it was. I think, you know, we could see it going that way based on what was happening with the Prime Minister's announcements. You know, I remember in early March, the latter part of March. And then obviously, you know, once the chief dental officer's message came out where everything was just shut down, effectively, you know, the first thing I was thinking was obviously on my team, you know, everything that we built over this period of time. But, you know, how are we going to ride this storm? And ultimately, the business head just went on thinking we've got to manage cash flow over here as quickly and as efficiently as we can. And so I sat down with my practice manager and my team very, very quickly, and we had a robust plan in place, which, you know, reduced the hemorrhaging at that stage as best as we could, like a lot of other businesses. But yeah, like you said, decisions had to be made, you know. Yeah.
And when you wanted to get this change pushed through in the practice, did you want to reinvent it? Did you want it to come out the other end of the process with your DNA all over it and your stamp? Or were you looking to evolve the thing you've bought? Because quite often, you know, we get lots of questions and people talk about the value of goodwill. The value of goodwill is very high. So one of the things when people buy a dental practice is they want to protect protect that value. And in many ways, it's quite a bold move to then make the investment and do the work you did, which kind of moves it away from where it was. But did you feel comfortable with that sort of approach?
I think the advice I would give to anyone is that don't be afraid of making decisions and don't be afraid to put your stamp on things. I think there is a tact in which you do it as well. And I think you often get this question, do you just go in all guns blazing?
Yeah, don't go like a bull in a china shop, yeah.
Exactly. And then effectively, completely destroy what made that practice, because I think that's one way you could possibly lose your team very quickly, or the existing that's there. The way I did it, I had very clear ideas of where I wanted the practice to go and very clear ideas in terms of the investment it needed. So, I literally brought my team and my team on that journey, and this may be a shock or surprise to you, but since I've actually taken over the practice, we've not actually lost one member of staff from the pre-existing organization. We kept them all on, and if there's one advice I could give to people, which is slightly different to maybe what's being told, historically, but this is my analysis of it, is that no one generally, when I looked at that practice, everyone had been working there for a long period of time, at least 5 years. So the existing owner must have seen some good qualities in those members.
That's dead right. Yeah.
So they all can't be bad. They must be good. And what I've tried to do is just bring them up another notch by another 10, 15%. That's it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
One of the things we used to say, we haven't done them for a while, but on the courses, we used to say to people, you don't go in and sack everybody, because remember, when they were employed, they were the best people at that time, which is exactly what you've just said, and it's brilliant, isn't it? That mold them to be what you want them to be, rather than say, oh, well, they're crap and I'll just get rid of them.
And also, I think the biggest change a business can go through is a change of ownership. Yeah, that's massive. It's destabilising for the patients, the people that work in the business. So if you then go a stage further and start changing the team as well, that's going to further destabilise it. And ultimately, they're the people that do have the relationships with the patients, and I think they're hoping it's going to work out. And if that's matched by your hope for them, I think that's where you get that kind of nice arrangement where they want to stick around and they want to be part of it. But credit to you, because it's not unusual. Occasionally somebody does fall by the wayside. It doesn't quite work out. But however you've evolved it, it's clearly something they want to be part of. You're the sole principal of the practice here.
I am.
Yeah. And I mean, so Chris and I, we've got 5 businesses between us and 9 business partners that, in different businesses across the different things. And honestly, I couldn't do it on my own. I'm not smart enough. I've got enough skills. I couldn't do it. So I'm in awe of people like you that take on that complete and utter responsibility of doing everything yourself. Did you ever think about having a business partner, or could you see working with a partner? I'm not pitching to join your business. I'm just asking.
I can see the pros and cons of both situations.
Yeah.
I think when I went into this venture initially, for myself, I wanted to learn everything I could about practice ownership, and I'm not the finished article yet. On both sides, both as a clinician but as a business owner, and then ultimately, hopefully as I get older, try and implement those skills onto a grander level. So what I found now is that particularly with Kreate, is that ultimately you're always time poor, and I realized that as a sole principal. You're always being pushed around in different directions. And now, in order for the brand to expand and grow, hopefully to other sites, which is what we're planning on doing, is that the only way forward I can see is with partners, genuinely. Because I think, although when you have a partnership model or you have business partners, you might have disagreements. I think that if ultimately you can iron out those disagreements and you can work, in tandem together, and you understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, the journey can be a lot more fun. Yeah. And I'm at a stage now where I also want to have fun, and join the journey with other people to eventually, hopefully grow the brand.
Yes, and I think disagreements are okay. I think if you're working towards a common purpose, but you just have different views on how that can be achieved, we will disagree.
There was a joke there. There was almost a joke to throw in there,
but we will disagree on things, and we'll disagree with our other business partners on things. But if it's coming from a place where you're trying to achieve the very best thing possible, and you're trying to make your point because you believe it's going to be good for that business, that can be a healthy thing. I think where it goes wrong is where you kind of have disagreements for the sake of just
and it becomes personal. I think that's the thing. Whenever we disagree about something, it's never personal. It's just about the fact of I might have a different viewpoint than your viewpoint, and then we work it out.
That's it. Yeah. But exciting that there's prospects for the future in terms of the Kreate Dental brand, going to other places.
That's the inevitable plan now. So I think I've learned a lot on this journey over the last 3 years, and ultimately, I like to think that the brand has a stable business head now to it, which can then hopefully help other people or other young aspiring principals to potentially embark on something similar.
Are you very chilled and mellow? This is the first time I've met you and the first time I've really spoken to you, and I get this sort of just sort of relaxed vibe. It doesn't mean, do you know what I mean? It's that sort of thing about the fact that, and whether it is because of your story, but you strike me as being sort of quite mellow and chilled about stuff. It doesn't mean you won't get upset and cross and angry, but you sort of strike me as this sort of that's all right, I can cope with that, that's fine. We'll just deal with that in a logical, we'll get onto it. Is that right? Or are you like a bit...
If you ask my better half, she might disagree with me.
In fairness, she did agree to marry you, though.
There you go. That's
congratulations on that.
Thanks. I would just say I think I've changed as I've got older with more experience. I think life throws you loads of challenges, as you mentioned, and ultimately it's how you deal with those challenges. You can either throw your toys out the pram completely and let every little situation get you quite worked up, or as you mentioned, take a step back and then find a reasonable solution to the problem that's in front of you. And that's the kind of methodology that I've adopted now.
I say, because that's what I sort of get from you is the fact of you're like okay, well, let's just look at that rather than go nuts, everything, react badly and then sort of, whatever that thing is, measure twice, cut once or something. Yes. You strike me as a measure twice, cut once person who says, well, let's just think about that. Let's step back, let's have a look at it, and then let's deal with it, as opposed to I'm going to throw my hands in the air, go and shout at a few people, make myself feel better, and then try and deal with it.
That's the thing. You're doing it to make yourself feel better, or that's the thing, and that ultimately doesn't lead to a positive outcome. And you might feel better for that short period of time, but in the long term, it's probably to your detriment.
I mean, and so being, an entrepreneur, a business owner, I think we're kind of in a realm now where those people are kind of becoming like the modern day rock stars. There's a lot of attention on business owners as being, an incredible path to go down. It's the riches, the fun, the joy. But we all are going to pay off our £2 trillion debt. Well, no, but we also know that it can be challenging as a business owner. And you said yourself about it being, you become time poor. You're always being pulled in different directions. So we talked about the goodness of, training the team and the team coming with you and that reinvention of the business and managing your way through COVID and future practices. But what are the downsides you've experienced of owning a business? Because quite often it doesn't get talked about that much. What are the sacrifices that go with it?
So I think it's 24/7. It's a 24/7 responsibility. And I think ultimately there's a couple of things which I found very quickly that resonated when I took over Kreate, which was you're responsible for so many people. And I never had that responsibility ever. Any decision you make has this cascading effect, not only on yourself, your team, but the patients and the population that you treat. And this can sometimes be tens of thousands of people. It could be a small decision. It could be a massive decision. And I think it's important to take stock of that at some point, to think that it's important not to make knee-jerk decisions. emotional decisions, because you have to weigh up, each and every scenario. I think you're always going to have the pressure of running a business, in the sense that, it has to obviously hit a certain level of profit every single month. You want the business to succeed. You're always pushing for new ways in how to grow the business. So I've always found that I'm sending emails at sometimes obscene hours in the morning. Whenever a light bulb moment happens, you have to quickly get on your phone and send an email. So that's got better with time. But for the first kind of year to 18 months, I would say, that was my life. It was 6-7 days a week, 75, 80 hour weeks, to try and stabilize this ship and try and get it moving in a positive direction.
I think it's a big responsibility.
Oh yeah,
I remember when we bought Frank Taylor's. Do you remember in the early days we suddenly realised that we were responsible for paying people's salaries, and those people have mortgages, and those people have lifestyles, and until that point we'd worked for a bank where we got a salary. It was great, didn't really matter, and then we bought this, and I can remember we had this conversation of going, flip, if we make a bad decision, it costs people potentially their houses. And that's quite a bit of stress that, you park, but the realisation is a real sort of journey, isn't it? As you were saying, Mihir, that journey of the fact of all these people trickle down out of possibly a good or a bad decision that you've made.
But I think for would-be practice owners, what you say is right. In those early days, it is a 14, 16, 18-hour day job. And anyone that kind of isn't up for that, they have to really think about whether it's for them. It doesn't last forever, but in those early days, actually the clinical dental bit is pretty straightforward because you've spent minimum 5 years at dental school. You've probably done a pile of postgraduate stuff. That's you're equipped for that, but you're not necessarily equipped for managing people. How to prepare financial forecasts. What's your marketing strategy? Where are you going to deploy your advertising budget? All these things. It's like, well, I don't know the answer to any of those. I've got to do some reading and try and understand what it is that I need to do to make good decisions.
And if I may say that, Andy, I think at this stage, I think we get taught how to do the clinical. And I think you've had this, we can bang the same drum all the time. How to do clinical. And, you could say, the level of clinical courses out there now in our profession is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's almost the same size industry as dentistry itself, as in the clinical side of dentistry. But what's not that well taught is the business side of dentistry. It's still very underrated. So if there was one kind of thing I would suggest, which probably would save me a lot of money actually in the initial stages, is to acquire some business skills or business courses. I know, again, I might name drop Frank Taylor here. I know Frank Taylor run a series of workshops and business workshops. They are really useful, and long-term can actually save you some money.
And I think part of the problem with it is that if you go on a clinical course, you spend £500 on the Friday, you learn a new skill, and on Monday you could charge a patient £700 based on the new skill you learn. The ROI on that is good. You can easily do that. But if you come on a business course or you go on a business course and you learn, how to read a profit and loss statement or how to improve your profitability or how to
not upset someone in HR.
Yeah.
So as you get a tribunal.
Yeah, exactly. How to manage or motivate your team. Trying to get an ROI on that is quite hard, and you've just got to accept that these are skills, long-term skills you need to run a successful business. But I think sometimes it is hard to see the immediate ROI on that. So it's quite nice to hear you, who's someone who's been through the process of not having those skills coming through and having to learn them on the job, to say, actually, if I could have learned that stuff a bit earlier, it might have been an easier pathway.
What's the hardest thing you've had to deal with, Mihir? In your practice ownership cycle? What was the biggest thing that was like, oh, flip, I hadn't really realised this was going to take up so much of my time or be quite as painful as I thought it was?
I think to get your staff on board takes time. I genuinely think you need to get people to buy into you and ultimately the culture that you're trying to create. Excuse the pun. And ultimately, what I found is that takes time, and it requires reaffirmation at several points. It's not something that you can just say once and then you expect people to understand that and understand reasons to why you do that. And then, sometimes it can come across, if you get it wrong, it can come across crass. It becomes about money, but it's not about that. It's important to understand people, the reasons why you do things is to create a better service, a better experience. And, I've always based it, whenever I talk to my team, it's never based on finance or figures or, we need to make this amount of money per month or per week. It's never based on that. It's always based on the reason why we do certain things is to elevate the standard of service to create a better patient experience.
But I think that regular ongoing affirmation spot on. I think so many people kind of read out their vision statement or what they want to be and say, right, has everybody got it? Good.
Yeah.
Right, can we do it now? And they don't constantly remind people what it is, but also celebrate it when they see it and comment when they don't see it. So if you have a vision of what you want your practice to be, if you keep seeing that being displayed, I'm sure you do say to your team, that's what we're about. That is exactly what Kreate looks like and feels like from a patient's point of view. And equally, if you see it not being deployed as you'd like, you say, is that the Kreate way? Is that the way we could and should be doing it? Because I think that constantly reminding and reinforcing it builds a tribe of people that get it. And then when you're not around, that whole energy is still present.
Exactly. And ultimately, for me, that's the inevitable success long term, is that, the values and core systems and effectively the culture that's been built is maintained whether I'm there or not there. So, Richard Branson's not on every single Virgin flight, but he's created a culture for Virgin.
Yes.
And it's the same principle that you can apply to so many businesses. You have obviously a figurehead. They implement a series of core values and systems. Similar to your organizations, Andy and Chris, where, if you're not there on the day-to-day basis, it's in good hands ultimately.
Yeah. Just a different tack now. Obviously, at the moment, the landscape in terms of work opportunities in dentistry is changing at the moment. I don't know how you're finding it in terms of finding and keeping good people, but there does appear to be a general employment issue across the profession. Has that affected you, and how do you see that kind of panning out as we go forward?
It has affected us, to be totally frank. I think, particularly on the nursing side of things, I think that, there's been numerous articles and journals written about it recently where there is a national shortage of nurses. And I think there's been several reasons for that. Brexit has made a massive difference on that front, ultimately. Generally speaking, where I'm located, there isn't a shortfall of dentists, but I know that there is a national problem there. Particularly maybe it's because of the type of dentistry that we're doing. We are seeing a paradigm shift, particularly with the younger generation of dentists moving more and more towards private dentistry. That's happening. And in some ways we're quite well positioned, because the practice that I have is a mainly private practice.
Is it Dartford you're at? Is it you Dartford?
Yeah, in Dartford. So I think it seems to be heading that way. On the recruitment front, and we're seeing more and more dentists who are elevating their clinical skills, doing loads of private courses, to inevitably be able to feel confident to provide those kind of treatments.
But also then, Mihir, you've built an environment that they can feel that they can benefit and grow in your environment. That's something, isn't it? If you hadn't you built it, they wouldn't want to then come for you. So I think that's great, because that's your culture thing, isn't it? Building a culture that says this is the type of dentistry we want to do. So bring it on, boys. Come and sign up for me. So as you can do your dentistry.
I think I've tried to always provide an environment where, people can thrive. If they need things, they need certain pieces of equipment, I've never stopped, or tried to stunt that. If you need something, you need it, because there's a justification for it. So that's, from my point.
Yeah, honestly, I'm really delighted how it's going for you. You deserve it. I think people with your outlook and enthusiasm for the profession and your practice. It's guys like you that it's great to talk to, because it is inspiring, and people that are having tough days will listen to this and go, actually, I can do it. Or if there's younger people who are umming and ahhing about, is it the right profession for them, or what direction they should go in, they can see your pathway that hasn't been straightforward and easy, but to have got to where you are, and it feels like this is just the beginning in terms of where you want to end up.
Yeah, definitely. Fascinating.
We always just finish up. We always ask our guests a couple of questions as we get towards the end, just to get a little closer inside their mind. So, if you could be a fly on the wall in a situation, any situation you want, what sort of scenario would you like to be sitting there watching?
I would love to be in a scenario where you see these world superpowers who own these companies, and just be a fly on the wall to think what is going on a day-to-day basis in terms of how they're managing their diaries and what they're planning next. Whether it's the Elon Musk of this world, or the Jeff Bezos, or even the Mark Zuckerbergs, just to be in that environment for a day, just to think how these guys think, and ultimately, they're the ones who are making global decisions now. Personally, that's how I feel.
No, I think you're right. I think the influence, there's a lot of talk about influencers, but those guys have massive influence.
Definitely.
The decisions they make change, hundreds of different companies will change their decision and strategy based on a few words that they might say. That'd be really interesting. And if you could meet somebody, whether they're still with us or not, fictional, real person, who would you like to sit down and have dinner with?
So I'm a big Manchester United fan. So you can probably see.
Well done. Done. Right answer.
That's two of them on the podcast.
Think about the result on Sunday, but we skip past that.
Exactly. Keep moving. We can edit that. We can edit that bit out. It's fine.
It was a great result if we'd have had it.
Yes.
Hope you're not a Saints fan, Chris.
Sorry, say.
I hope you're not a Southampton fan. That's for sure.
No, I'm an Arsenal fan. It's
worse than Southampton.
I would love to have a sit down dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson. Where do you start with Ferguson? 26 years, unbelievable career with Manchester United, and I think he just had this knack of elevating the club. I can see Chris wincing over here. Yeah, elevating the club year on year out.
Arsene Wenger.
Yes, he was great as well. Just by little things. And now football is so complicated as a sport.
I think the thing with Alex Ferguson for me was, footballers are young, testosterone-filled, everything at their feet, including the football. They're not easy people to manage. So to pull together a bunch of young people like that.
What's that Giggs story about his car?
Oh, yeah. So you probably know me here, but when Giggs was obviously playing for the juniors, and when he got his first contract, he went out and bought himself a brand new Aston Martin and sort of swept into the car park. And Fergie came out and said to me, he said, "You take the car back." He said, "You don't show off like that." He said, "I'll tell you when you can get that car." And as Giggs told that story in later life, it was like, actually, that was kind of
the turning point,
the right thing to do, because it was the football that was important, not all the other bits that sit around it. And he had that ability to kind of treat everybody individually, couldn't he? He could find the right thing for each person. I agree. I think he'd be a great person to sit down with for a few hours.
See, even I'd like to sit down and have a dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson. I think that would be quite fascinating. Probably with Arsene Wenger, because that would be even more interesting.
Although I think that they were really good friends. I think they shared common interest in wine, didn't they?
Yeah, their bar accounts, they actually were quite friendly.
Yeah,
and because I think that great thing was they. I think we sort of mentioned it earlier, and in a way with partnerships, is they had great respect for each other. They might not agree with each other, and it might be a bit adversarial, but that respect thing, I think, goes a long, long way, doesn't it? To say, actually, I can respect that you're different, but that doesn't mean I'm going to fall out with you. It just means that I respect that you're different. Yeah, I think that's the way to look at stuff, really.
Absolutely. Well, Mihir, I've really enjoyed the chat. I think it's been fascinating to hear
really
your story. I genuinely wish you the very best, and I'm going to keep a close eye on what comes down the line for you.
Well, thanks, Andy. Chris, it's been a pleasure to be on this afternoon, and I hope that the listeners have get some real value out of it.
They will for sure. They will for sure.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
No, not at all. Lovely.
No,
anyway,
brilliant.
Look after yourself, Mihir. Really appreciate your time today.
You.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Tada. What an enjoyable chat with Mihir.
Oh, it's great.
What an
Nice
absolutely
bloke.
lovely chat.
Nice bloke.
Absolutely lovely
Nice
chat.
Unique story.
Oh, and inspiring, isn't it? It's not that kind of, always destined to be a dentist. And at 15, 16 years old, to give 6 months of his time without the expectation of anything other than learning, getting knowledge.
No,
and that put him on the path to become a dentist and now a relatively young principal.
I think it's a great one, isn't it? About we are all a product of our experience.
Yes.
His experience of his health has, and as he said, it has made his view on everything else sort of, as he said, it doesn't pale into insignificance. But it's I'm here or I'm dead, and I might not survive. But to then effectively channel that into the fact of what else? What can anything else be that's worse than this? I think it's a real massive positive.
And the honesty of business isn't easy. You put in long hours. You're sending those. We've been there, the 2:00 in the morning emails. Yes, it's fun and it's enjoyable, but I think sometimes it's seen as kind of being a bit more glossy than it is. So to hear that flip side,
it's almost a bit Instagram.
Yeah.
Hey, look, fantastic! It's all work. It's great. No, guess what? What's that thing they say that people who get instantly successful have spent 10 years becoming instantly successful?
Exactly. It took me 20 years to become an overnight success. It's that sort of thing. No, it was a really valuable, and I think particularly. Mihir's episode about for younger dentists, and even people who are at the stage where they're possibly even thinking about dentistry. It's a really powerful story that says if you apply yourself, what can be achieved.
Yeah. No, it was very good, very good. Great guy to talk to.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.